Right, so we just ran to the galley and we grabbed some mineral water. We're back here on the flight deck. I guess it's probably getting pretty warm in here now, right?
Yeah, it's getting a bit toasty in here. I think it would be.
Yeah, so here's a question for you. Do you ever... because we can open the windows in this aircraft, which is one of the few flight sim aircrafts we can do that.
Yeah.
Is there much point? I mean, on a day like today, you're not just going to let them all warm air in.
It does a pretty good job. If there's a bit of a breeze, opening the window actually makes it's a bit selfish because it makes the flight deck feel nice and fresh, whereas in the back they just boil.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
So how do you open the window in this
So
thing?
the way you open the window is you just put your hand on the push button that you've got there,
Okay.
push it in, and then you basically pull it back, and as you're pushing it and pulling it back, it unlocks, and then you just drag it backwards and it makes a ratchet noise, just like that.
So it goes back like that.
And it goes back all the way there. Now, the reason these windows open, because, for example, in the Dash 8, they don't open, do they?
No.
Is because of an evacuation requirement. So they actually call they're called the direct vision windows.
Okay.
I don't know why they're just not called the side window.
Okay.
But it's so we can escape out of them if we need to.
That's it. So
they're
really not really designed for you getting fresh air. They're more designed for you to get out of here.
Yeah, that's what it's for, yeah. No, like on the 747, there's escape hatch in the roof, and I know on the 777 there's a few more, but here it's just the windows or the door behind you, and that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously then there's another window over on the other side. So let's just open that, and then it kind of goes back on the ratchet, and then if we want to close it again. So it's quite weird, isn't it? Because you can actually see, like, this is the airframe here.
Yeah,
you can actually see the airframe.
It's very cold as well, actually. After a long flight, if you touch that, it's, like, really cold to the touch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then you've got this little pin. What does this little pin do?
Yeah, so the pin, this is how you... So if you now try and close the window, it just won't close, which is correct. Because what you have to do is you have to reset the pin, so you just push it backwards, and then that's it. And now you can drag the window forwards again, and you can basically just push it closed, and it latches itself.
Okay.
That's it. It's very easy to close, very easy to open.
And the little red thing here on the handle, it's important that this pops up.
Yeah, exactly. What's that showing you is it's showing that the window is properly locked. If you can see it's closed, but you don't see the red line, then it's closed but not properly locked.
Okay.
So it won't make an airtight seal, which is bad for everyone.
Right. And in the flight sim labs, they've actually modelled this. If you don't close it properly, you'll have a problem.
Yeah.
So we never know. Maybe later in the course you might sneak in a little thing because part of the checks, right, is to check that you can see.
It is. It's part of the checks, and it's really important, to do it, because there have been cases. There was a British Airways aircraft took off once and had to hold for 3 hours because it wouldn't pressurise and they couldn't dump fuel.
Yeah.
So they had to fly.
That's a bit
so it's not
embarrassing.
good. Yeah, it's not good.
And obviously we've got a little window blind here as well.
Yeah.
And are they effective? Do they do anything?
Yeah, they're pretty good. They work quite well. There's one there, one behind, and that's it really. You've got the sun visor as well, but they work pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. So just kind of keep the sun out of your face when you're high up.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've also got this little light as well here. And then this is to dim it, and the other one is to switch it on, right?
That's it, yeah. And really what that light is sort of a legacy light.
Do you actually need that much?
No, you never use it.
You never use it
because it's for charts that you pin on there that we don't use.
And you don't use paper charts anymore.
Yeah, that's what it's for.
Yeah, got you. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll have a look when we do. We're going to do a night flight. So when we get to the night flight, we'll have a play around with all the night lighting. We don't need to do that just yet. Right. Okay. So we're here in the flight deck, and I'm guessing now we need to start getting things set up. What I think would be quite useful is if we go around the flight deck and we'll have a look at some of the controls, some of the switches. And maybe what we'll do is look at the things that you press day to day on the line. And obviously some of these are going to be switches that we're only going to use on a bad day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's kind of concentrate on the ones that we're going to use and then probably come back to some of those bad day switches.
Yeah,
I think that's the easiest thing, right? Yeah. Okay, so where do we start on the overhead?
So we start on the left side of the overhead.
All right.
And first of all, I guess start at the bottom if you're happy with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so the wiper, as we've already said, we're checking that it's in the off position. And you can use the wiper on the ground if it's raining, of course.
Okay, so avert your eyes if you're an engineer. But there's two speeds, so it's slow and then fast. And this is the real sound. This is what it sounds like.
It's pretty loud. It's a very accurate sound.
They are quite noisy.
They are, yeah.
Are they quite distracting when they're on? Imagine it's quite distracting.
It's reasonably distracting, but when you're landing, you're kind of just focused on it, so it's okay. And if you're on the taxi out, you only use them normally for a few seconds and then just sort of put them off.
And then when you... So that noise, is that it parking?
It's it parking itself underneath it. It has a little lip on the outside so it doesn't whistle. Because I know on the dash and things like that, they sit up in the air.
On the dash, they kind of stick them up so that they don't stick in the airflow.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. Now, okay, we know what it is. Let's talk about use of it. Do you use them in the air, or do you not generally need to use them once you're in the sky?
Generally, as soon as you're out of sort of, I would call it a visual phase. So I would call a visual phase of the flight the takeoff, because you need to use looking at the window for the primary reference. So you use them for takeoff and for landing. Okay. And realistically, as soon as you're off the ground, you can just...
because the nose is pointed in the sky after that. What is there to see?
What are you looking at, sort of thing. Like, if you could turn them on if you want to try and look for traffic or whatever, but it's raining heavily, so you're probably not going to see
much. You're not going to see anyway.
So,
okay. You're already in cloud probably at that
exactly,
point. Yeah. Okay, so generally speaking, on the ground, heavy rain, that's when it's most likely to be used.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there a speed limit for using them?
There's a limit up to, you can use them all the way up to 230 knots.
Okay, all right. So whatever phase of flight you want to do, but it's got to be below 230 knots.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So back on the overhead then. Now, rain repellent. Now, I know about this one only because I saw a TV show about it. It's like a thing that you squirt onto the windscreen.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a chemical that you press the button and it will spray on the windscreen, and it does what it says on the tin. Basically, it coats the window with a very fine layer of it. So when the rain hits it, it just blows off the window. Okay.
All right. Now, do you use it? It's in the aircraft and it's equipped. Are you discouraged from using it in any way?
Yeah, it's in the aircraft. It's equipped because it's a requirement, but we are discouraged from using it because if you do it on a dry window, it's very bad.
Does it stick? Is it like glue?
It sticks, and I think it can even damage the window in terms of the laminated effect of the window, so that's really bad. And also, it's really bad for the environment. Apparently, it's quite toxic.
Okay, so try and use it sparingly.
Yeah. I've only ever used it once, I think, and that was when the rain was really bad, and we're like, okay, let's screw the environment. It's like we need to see.
Yeah. Is it effective?
Yeah, very effective. It works really well.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It's better than windscreen wipers, really.
Yeah, it is, because you get the whole advantage of you being able to see and no noise and no distraction. And there's also, in heavy rain with the wiper, it's clear, not clear, clear, not clear, clear.
Of course,
so you
because it wipes and then it gets wet, and it wipes and it gets wet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now we've got the calls above that. Presumably back in the cabin there are telephones where you can call them, right?
That's it. Yeah, it's like, imagine I want to call the person in the front using their phone, and I want to call the person at the back using their phone, and that's it.
So if we press the button, we'll hear the noise, right?
Should do.
So it's kind of faint, but you can hear the forward one, and then the aft one you can't really hear it because it's all the way at the back.
Which is realistic. Yeah.
Okay, and then mech.
Yeah, it's the mechanic call horn, and what it is sometimes you'll have an engineer outside or a ground crew. Sometimes they do the pushback without a headset. So to get their attention, you press the button and it makes a noise in the gear bay.
Okay, and it's like a horn.
It's like a horn.
I think we can hear this if we press it.
Yeah, I can hear that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's there's a little speaker somewhere down in the gear.
Yeah, and there's actually some captains use it as a they shouldn't, but it's quite funny when you taxi past spotters. They go beep beep.
So they kind of do a bit of that. So this is like the aeroplane equivalent of beeping the horn.
It's a horn. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Yeah. Right, emergency. This is a kind of bad day button. It's a very brief description.
Very quickly, it's basically, we were calling them in the forward or the aft. If you want to let them know that I'm going to call you, but it's an emergency, you press that button.
Okay, so this is the pick up, because
pick up now.
We don't want coffee. There is an emergency.
I would say that most airlines don't use that button actually at the moment anymore. Yeah.
All right.
But it's there.
Okay. Now, moving up, got the oxygen page. Again, I guess a couple of bad day buttons. Let's talk about the high altitude landing button first of all.
Yeah, so what this is specifically designed if you're going to land at very high altitudes. Mm-hmm. There is an issue that you have with the Airbus that once you put it on like that, this now means that the masks in the back, normally they would drop automatically at 14,000 feet. So it doesn't matter where you are, if the cabin is at 14,000 feet, it's going to drop. But now, because we can land at 14,000 feet, that would be a bad...
Of course, because there are, if you Google, there's a big list of the highest airports, and most of them are in China. So you're probably reasonably unlikely to encounter them in the sim.
So that's why if you press this button, now the masks will deploy at 16,000 rather than the 14,000, because we can land with the Airbus up to 14,000, which gives us that bit of a margin. Okay,
all right. So that's something to do if you fly to one of those really high altitude airports in China.
That's exactly it.
You can press this button.
It's got you covered.
It's got you covered, absolutely, yeah. Okay, cool. Right, mask man on, bad day button, but I think it's a quick explanation.
It is. Yeah, it's basically, as you can see, with the switch covered up, it's in automatic. So as we just said, automatically at 14,000 feet, the mass is going to come down. If they don't, you press the button, and they will come down.
Okay, cool. And then passenger oxygen, it's not a button.
It's not a button, no. And you can see that because it has 2 little dots, but nothing else on there. And it's just to show you when the mass have come down. That's all it's for.
So if those 2 lights are on, that means the passenger oxygen.
It means it's come down. Yeah, it means they've dropped automatically or manually.
Now, crew supply off. This is a button that you do need.
This is a very well used button. So basically, in the flight deck, we have an oxygen bottle, which we looked at on the walk around on the left side, and it supplies all the mass in the flight deck with the crew supply button off. They're not supplied. If you turn it on, then the mass is supplied.
Okay, so if we're going to do in a while the oxygen check.
Yeah.
When it's pressed in, it doesn't say on. It just goes dark.
It's dark.
And this is an Airbus thing.
It's actually quite interesting that the designer of the Airbus said this was the thing they were most worried about when they launched the Airbus, the dark cockpit concept, which is if it's in the normal function, it's dark.
Okay.
But what's interesting is most of the industry has just gone, yeah, it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, no, it is. So
if
you look and you don't see any lights, then everything's working and it's fine.
There was actually no controversy about that. And they said that was the thing they were most worried about.
Wow. Yeah. And it worked well.
And it works really, really well.
So the crew supply, when it's off, it's off.
Yep.
And obviously, when there's no power supply, it'd be dark as well. So
exactly,
it's worth mentioning that.
Yeah.
But in normal operations, we turn it to on.
Yep.
Technically, and it goes dark, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, moving up then. We've got the GPWS. Some of these, I guess, are bad day switches, so we won't concentrate on them too much right at this point. Yeah. But let's just mention the other ones. Let's talk about the ground control and the CVR buttons.
Yeah, they're quite interesting, this. So the ground control button is basically, when it's normal, as you can see, it's not illuminated normally.
Okay, so that's on. That's on. And then if I press it again, it goes to...
auto.
It goes to auto.
That's why it has auto written next to it. So basically, automatically, once you start the engines, the cockpit voice recorder is going to start recording for 2 hours. But it wouldn't have recorded anything up to the engine start.
Okay.
So it wouldn't have heard us doing our nice little brief and talking about what we're talking about now.
Talking about the cabin crew.
Yeah, wouldn't hear any of that. So it's quite important for them.
Me bitching about my ex-wife, all that. Yeah, okay.
None of that's going to be there, and they want to hear that. So what they do is they make us turn this on as part of the setup flow.
Okay.
So that's why it goes blue, because it's to show that it's sort of a temporary selection.
Okay, so the auto mode, when the engines start, it'll start recording. But they want to capture all the stuff on the ground.
Exactly.
So if I do a brief to you and say, right, we're going to take off, we're going to turn left, and we crash into a mountain because we should have taken off and turned right.
Yeah.
They capture us screwing up that, and they realise why we crashed.
Yeah, and it's just important to really get as much information as you can, and everyone does it. There's no sort of hesitation. You just do it as part of the flow. That's the way it is.
That's it. Okay. Yeah. All right, so there we go. So the ground control. So at this point now, we want to turn that to on and leave it.
And leave it.
Okay, cool. Right, and then if I'm bitching about my ex-wife, can I then press this button and it raises it?
There are a few. I'm not 100% sure of what some of the criteria. I think it has to be something like parking brake set, engine shut down. Then you can erase sort of like the last recording. But why people don't ever use it is because it flags big time. Because then someone's going to eventually look at it and go, why did you delete that?
So at some point, the aircraft captures all the data.
Yeah.
And is it downloaded by an engineer at the end of the day, or does it automatically upload it to the cloud? Or I guess it works in different ways.
I think how it works, from what I understand, is the cockpit voice recorder is just obviously a constant loop, and it's recording all the data with the aircraft. But what we have is ACARS, which we'll come to later on, and that sends all the information from the aircraft on a live update back to headquarters, and they would see that you've pressed that button and go, what did they delete? And then they might go and pull the data recorder, because they physically have to remove it to plug it into something, and then look. So that's what I think it's from.
So the reason we've erased something is probably because we've done something wrong.
Yeah, and the thing is that's great with all these European carriers now, and it's what's improved safety so much, is every flight is tracked in real time for thousands of different parameters, absolutely thousands of them, and all the pilots know this, so they fly within the criteria that are set out, because they know if they don't, then they're going to get a phone call straight away. Whereas back in the day, it was like, I'll be okay.
So when you get the phone call, that's going to be somebody from the safety department in the airline. You're a jet saying, "So boys, what were you doing?"
Yeah, exactly. So, and one of those things that might make them give you a phone call is like, "Why did you just erase the last flight?" And you go,
so you don't ever press that.
No one really presses it. I'm sure there's possibly a reason to do it, but you get a phone call from them for if you've broken some sort of, flag and they look at it and they think it's quite serious, and they can actually, if it's serious enough, they can ground you.
Wow.
On the phone, they say, "I'm sorry, you're going to go on the no-fly list," and that's it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We don't want to mess around with it.
No, we'll leave it alone.
All right. So, speaking of CVR, we can also test it as well. What does it do if we press this?
So, all we do is we press the button, and the parking brake has to be set for this test to work, which, as we can hear, we did set it before, which is correct. And as long as you hear a noise, that's it.
Okay.
You know the test passed.
So what does it do? Does it send a little tone and then it plays it back? Is that what it's doing? Because it takes a little while when you press it.
I think it now records the tone, then plays itself back. So that's the test it's doing itself.
Okay, so that's why it takes a few seconds to actually make the noise.
Yeah.
Okay, right, let's go up to the GPWS. I know this one, ground proximity warning system, right?
Great. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. I don't know you. I can do the rest of the course.
So I'll go.
Okay, so let's start from the left then. So terrain.
Yeah, so this is the terrain function of the GPWS. So basically, when you get the pull up, terrain ahead.
Okay.
That's that part of it. And that is separate from the EPGWS, which is the terrain on ND button. We'll come to that later on, but this is a separate system.
Okay, so this part is the kind of oral warnings, whereas the other bit is actually the stuff that's displayed to you on the map. And
this is based on what the aircraft can see in terms of it's not using a database, it's using radio altimeter, sort of functionality. So this is sort of more accurate than the other one.
Okay, all right. So you can turn it off.
You can turn it off.
There might be situations where you need to turn it off, but generally speaking, we're not going to touch
Generally,
this.
It's always left on. But for example, there's some approaches that give incorrect warnings, so then you would turn it off, and it would tell you, at this miles, turn it off because you're going to get an incorrect warning.
So, for example, if you've got a Greek Islands program, Samos is a place where you often get a terrain warning because you're flying, basically towards a big mountain and then making a turn at the last minute.
Exactly. So then you could brief the guy, hey, you know what, we're going to maybe get an undue warning, let's turn off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then SIS?
System turns all of those modes after it off.
Okay.
So it turns basically the whole GPWS off.
Right, okay.
And that's if...
So you won't get the kind of too low gear, too low flat. You
it's all gone, And the reason I think that button's there is there could be some sort of fault that causes it to just... You need to get rid of the whole system because it could be spurious. So you can just turn the whole thing off with that button.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So GS mode, flat mode, and landing flap 3. I have a suspicion I know what landing flap 3 is. You can land in the Airbus without full flap.
That's correct. Yeah, it's they call it a reduced flap landing.
Okay.
So flaps 3. So you can land with flaps full or flaps 3. And if you do choose to land flaps 3, you've basically got to tell the aeroplane, hey, I am landing flaps 3. You do that by pressing one button in the MCDU to tell it performance-wise, hey, I want you to calculate the performance of flaps 3. And then you've got to tell the GPWS, by the way, don't freak out when I'm on the approach and I've only got flaps 3 out.
You haven't set the flaps. What are you doing?
It's like, I know, but then you have to tell it to do that with a button. So.
Okay, all right. So we'll come to that. We'll maybe have a look at a flap 3 landing. Is there an advantage in a flap 3 landing? You're going to land a bit faster, I'm guessing.
A little bit faster, a little bit less fuel used, and quieter.
Okay.
So, and a lot of people actually, they quite like the way it lands flaps 3. It's more like a Boeing.
Okay.
More conventional.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is interesting.
So we'll come back to that, and maybe we'll do a flap 3 landing later in the program.
Yeah.
Flat mode, does that turn off your too low flaps?
I believe that's what it does. Yeah.
Okay, you've never pressed this button. These are buttons you've
never
pressed it.
I hope I don't have to press it.
Yeah, I guess so. And then glide slope mode, does this turn off the glide slope warning? So if you go below the glide slope or above it,
it turns it off. So you'll get one that says too low, glide. I think it says glide slope. Yeah. And then it will say it again louder. Okay. And you can turn this off because you might be flying a visual approach. And in the background, sometimes the Airbus can tune the ILS, even if you don't tell it to. So, but realistically, don't turn it off unless you're told.
Okay, all right. So they're, again, not switches that you'd normally be touching.
No.
Right, we've got a couple of bad day switches here, which we're not going to talk about too much because we're going to come back to these.
Yeah, the whole panel really is.
This whole panel is like bad days. Is there anything really? There's emergency this is kind of generators, emergency generators, stuff like that, electric power. Is there anything here that on a day-to-day basis on the line you would press?
Nothing there, no. And realistically, what this panel is that we'll come back to this at a later date, obviously, but the emergency electrical configuration, which is what this panel's for, is when you have some sort of bad fire to do with the electrical system, then you use these buttons to try and isolate it. So on the line on a normal day, and hopefully you never have to press them.
Yeah, if you're pressing these, you're not having a good day.
It's a bad day.
Above it, we've got the evacuation staff we're hopefully going to be having a look and getting a chance to press these.
Yeah,
but we are going to revisit it. I guess the one that we do need to check is this one on the right, Captain and Purser or Captain. What does that do?
Yeah, that's the one that you check every single day on the line. Different operators have different positions for the switch. So Captain means that the captain is the only one that can initiate the evacuation noise. Basically,
so
he's the only one that can make that noise.
So if we press the command button, we'll get the evacuation signal.
Yeah.
And the captain is the only person that can activate that. There is another button that's a bit like that, presumably in the back.
There is. It's on the flight attendant panel, and it says like emergency evacuation. They can press it, and it will light a button up in here saying, "Hey, I've pressed mine," but it still won't sound
But it won't make the noise.
No, but if the switch was in captain and purser, so purser, cabin manager, whatever you want to call them, then theirs would. So they have the ability to do it from there.
So they could generate the evacuation horn from their side.
It's dependent on what the airline wants. So that's why they left that switch there.
Okay. So most airlines, which way around do they do it?
I think most of them do it with captain.
So
because it's captain's discretion. Captain holds the ultimate responsibility.
And Eurojet's SOP, standard operating procedure, is the captain gets that decision.
We have the ultimate control.
Absolutely. Now, does that stop the cabin crew? So let's say we land one of my terrible landings, which you've seen all the way through the many programs. We slide off the runway. We're in a ditch. The engine's off. There's smoke. There's whatever. Are they just going to sit there waiting for us to press the button?
Well, what they're told is if they deem the situation is catastrophic, so that sounds pretty catastrophic, like normally one of my lands as well is pretty catastrophic sometimes, then they can evacuate without the command, because it could be that we're incapacitated.
Yeah, we could be slumped over the controls or dead.
Yeah, so if they look around and they think, you know what, this is really bad, they can just evacuate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So again, this is not a page that we hope we need. Right. Now the flight controls are next, the flight control switches.
Yeah.
There's a lot to this, and I think that this is something that we're going to come back as we go through the course. We're going to talk about some of these concepts. But let's just very quickly just talk about what they are, and then we'll come back to what they do.
So we have this panel, and there's another panel on the other side that we're going to look at in a little bit, and they have all the push buttons that control all the separate flight control computers. Ultimately, they all are part of the fly-by-wire system. And the ELAC stands for the elevator and aileron computer, so controls the elevator and the aileron. The SEC is the spoiler elevator computer, and then the FAC is the flight augmentation computer. But really, for now, they control the elevators, they control the spoilers, and then the FAC does a lot of the calculations for terms of, what does the fly-by-wire need to do. And that's
actually just flying the airplane through the sky.
Yeah, and it calculates speeds and weights and all this sort of stuff. So that's why it's the flight augmentation computer. So it's augmenting.
So we waggle the stick, and it interprets those signals and changes that into moving the flying surface.
Yeah, and it does a lot. A lot of these computers do a lot of different things, but the facts are pretty important.
Okay, all right. Now, these buttons turn them off.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing when we're going to go and fly some people from Milan to Palma, we very much want to leave these on now.
Yeah, you just leave them alone. You know, there is no reason to turn these on or off unless you are told to do so by an ECAM or whatever procedure.
Okay, but we will come back and we'll have a play with these switches later on when things are a bit more exciting. Right, let's continue just going over the overhead. We're at the top now. Right, the ADIRs, and we can see this is kind of split up into the ear and the ad.
Yeah.
So is that the ad and the ears make the ADIRs?
Yeah, pretty much. It's one of those Airbus things where I feel like they felt they had to rename everything. They're like, no, it's not. It's not an FCU. It's it's like the MCDU, not the FC. It's like, okay, come on, guys.
Okay.
Whatever. They just have to kind of add their own name onto it. So they decided to call it an ADIRS, ADIRU, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different names for them that people give them. But as you said, it combines both the air data and the inertial.
So that's
reference.
what the ADR bit. That's the air data. What's the R bit stand
so
for?
the air data reference computer, basically. That's what it is. It's a little computer.
And there are three of them.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
There's three, and the best way to think of it is, we were looking at all those probes on the outside, like the pitot tubes and the static ports. They obviously are just sensing pressure, but the plane wants to know this in an electronic form. So the ADRs take that and turn it into electronic data.
Okay,
so that's what they do.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so we have the air data computers, And then the IR, so what's the IR?
So the IR is the IRS, so the Inertial Reference System, and there's 3 of them, and they are basically there to tell the aircraft when it's on stand, it goes somewhere else. It goes, okay, I was here, now I'm going there. So it's what we had before we had GPS.
Okay, so let's just rewind a little bit. Obviously, we all know how GPS works. It's very easy. You have satellites in the sky. Yeah. It kind of talks to the satellite kind of knows where it is, and it works out its position. We all kind of can figure that out. But there are a lot of Airbuses. I mean, the Airbus has been around since, 1987, I think
That's
we
correct,
said?
yeah.
And GPS wasn't really a thing back then.
No, I don't think because there are some aircraft, some of the Lufthansa ones don't have GPS still.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
they're
So
still
they're
flying on the line. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So they don't have GPS. So this is the only way you can actually navigate the aircraft is by using the IRS.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a very accurate system. It drifts a few miles after a 3 or 4 hour flight, which sounds quite a lot. But you've got to remember that's only 1 or 2 miles accuracy out without using any sort of GPS or anything like that. It's managed to keep a track of its own.
It's pretty clever.
It's pretty clever.
So an IRS system, just to step back a little bit, it's a gyroscope, which is a bit like a very old-fashioned child's toy, that like spinning top.
It's
thing.
like a spinning top.
So it's basically it's like a very sophisticated spinning top, and because it's spinning, it can kind of move in space and time and keep track of it. It kind of hurts my brain a bit to figure out how it works. We don't really need to know how it works. No. We just need to know that it is working.
Yeah.
And effectively on this aeroplane there are 3 of them, right?
There's 3 of them, and one thing that's interesting about it is, when you turn on a Boeing, you actually sort of hear that there's like a noise in the background.
We are hearing a tick 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 noise, but that's the engines, because we've got the windows open.
Yeah, but when you hear that noise, and you hear it even when people are transmitting on the radios and stuff like that, they are the physical gyros that they have.
Really?
Because a lot of them have
737 is
you can
very
hear them,
noisy.
Yeah. Whereas the NG, you don't hear it as much because they have the same as this, which is the laser ring gyro. So it works exactly the same as a normal gyro, but it just uses a laser.
Okay, so it's a lot quieter.
It's silent. Yeah, it's basically silent.
So you can't hear the IRSs in an A320 at all?
Not really, no. Well, when you put them on, you'll realise there's no change in the noise.
Okay, all right. So so this is the IRSs. We may come back and start talking about some of this in a little bit more detail later on, but for now, we just need to kind of get them aligned, because at the moment they're off.
They're off, yeah.
And presumably we'll have to initialise them, and it takes a little while for them to figure out where they are.
Yeah, it normally takes about 10 or 11 minutes, which is fairly standard. It's like a normal aircraft, but it's really, really easy to do and operate, because all you have to do is you turn them from off to the nav position, and that's it. And you do it in a certain order.
Okay, so I've noticed that it's IR1, then 3, then 2.
Yeah.
Seems a bit weird. Is this a weird Airbusism?
It's a weird Airbus thing, because they think of it as the one on the left is like the captain's one, the one on the right, so IR2, is the first officer's one, and the one in the middle is the standby one. And they do this a lot, where it's like left, right, middle is standby.
Right, so you think of it more like left, right, middle, rather than 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, try and think of it like that. So that's why when you turn it on, we turn it on as 1, 2, 3.
Right.
So left, right, middle.
Okay. Now, when you turn it on, we get this little on-bat thing. Now, this is nothing to do with Batman. This is Robin. This is a little test.
It's like as I understand it, it's basically testing to see, I'm on the battery, and then it goes off the battery, and when you see the on-bat go away, you know that the units are using the external power, the AC power from the aircraft, which is what we were saying it wants to do. Okay. So as soon as the light's gone away, then it's fine. But with us, we don't have to look for it. There are different airlines, different procedures. But,
there's no... For Eurojet, we don't have to sit and wait for the on-bat light to go out.
No, we just go for it, because...
So we go da-da-da, and then it will come on, we go da-da-da. So it's saying on-bat, we're not sure whether that's for the 2 or the 3, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You just leave it, because I think where that comes from is if it stayed on the battery, we would probably get an ECAM warning us anyway.
Or the light would stay on.
Or the light would stay on.
Yeah. So we're here at the lights. Yeah. I love aeroplane lights.
Oh, they're great, aren't they?
All right, so we've already talked about some of these. The nose, the taxi and the takeoff, we talked about that on the walk around.
Yeah.
So we kind of know what they do.
Yep.
And then the runway turn-off, which is just hidden here below the strip. You can't quite see the thing, but there you go. Right, so we talked about that. Let's talk about the landing lights along the bottom.
Yeah.
If we have a look under the wings, we can see them, right?
Yeah, that's right. In the moment, you can see they're in the retract position.
Yeah.
So they have the retract, off, and on. They're the 3 positions that you've got.
Okay.
So if you put them to off, then they will come out but the lights won't come on. They will physically extend from the wings, but the lights won't come on. And then if you put them to on, the lights will turn on.
Okay, so it seems to me a bit weird why you would want to have them out, like dangling down in the airflow, but not switched on.
The only reason I can think of is because if they want to do maintenance on the bulbs, so they want to replace the bulb, so rather than having to sort of scrabble with it in the wing, they get it to come down.
And then they can get to it easier.
That's all I can think of. On the line, you would use retract or on.
Okay, so you don't use the off position.
No, there's no, because if you've got them extended, you're already getting the drag from them being out. You may as well put the light on.
Do you actually get? Is it noticeable? Can you hear? Do they make a noise, or do you get any does the vertical speed increase a bit because you've got a bit more drag?
Like in the climate, if you haven't retracted them by about 250 knots, you can feel this. Like you can feel the whole airframe slightly vibrating.
Really?
And the quicker you go, the worse it gets. And you can feel it as a passenger. Okay. You can actually feel it sort of like. It's like you're going across a slightly bumpy road. It's like because it's the airflow coming from it. But yeah, in the descent, if you put them out, they add about 1 to 200 feet per minute in descent.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if you need a little bit of extra descent, then put the landing lights.
That's what they do. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. And then along the top row, the strobes are pretty straightforward. We know about that. Those big, really strong, kind of strobing lights.
Yeah. Exactly.
The Airbus has a famous double strobe, right?
Yeah, it has. I don't know why. I think it's a French thing again. Where they were just like, we'll do it this way because
we'll just do it this way because it's nice.
Yeah.
We like lights. Paris is the city of lights.
Exactly.
So they thought, why not more lights?
This is what you'll learn with the Airbuses. They did a lot of things their own way. Some of them you kind of go, that makes sense. Like the dark cockpit concept. The other ones you just go, all right.
Okay.
Fine. You do you. It's like
That's
whatever
good.
you want.
All right.
Yeah.
So so it's a double strobe. So it's strobe.
Yeah.
Strobe.
Yeah.
Whereas on a Boeing, it's strobe.
I'm sure they had their reason, probably to do with being easier to notice, because it's like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that?
It's an Airbus.
Yeah. So I think they've obviously got their own reason for it, but I'm not sure why.
Now, there is an auto. There's an off button,
which
is off position, which is straightforward. There's also an auto position. So what does that do?
So auto is, I like to think of it as that, I forgot to turn them on, but they're going to come on anyway position, which is what a lot of people leave it in. So once you taxi out, so right now, if we were doing the flow, we would leave them in auto.
Okay, so at the moment it's in off.
Yeah, so if we put it in auto, the lights not come on, and then what will happen is as soon as the aircraft leaves the ground, so it detects that there's no weight on the wheels anymore, the lights will come on.
Okay, so if we forget to put the strobes on,
they're going to come on.
As soon as we leave the ground, they'll automatically come on.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if we're in the on position, that automatically, so they will just come on.
They just come on. Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. No problem. So we leave it in auto.
Yeah.
So basically, we get on the aeroplane, we start the thing, auto, and then at the end of the day, when we're finished, would we leave it in auto for the turnarounds? If we did 3 or 4 turnarounds, we'd leave it in auto.
I leave it in auto, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the only time we would turn it to off is at the end of the day, back at base, we turn it to off.
Yeah, that's it. Because then it's sort of securing it down for the next crew.
All right, okay. We've got the beacon. That's the big red light.
Yeah, the big light on the bottom of the top, and then
is there one on the top, one on the bottom? Is that it?
Yeah, there is, but you can't obviously check the one on the top because it's on the top. But yeah, there is one up there. Yeah.
Okay, the wing lights we talked about.
Yeah.
They illuminate the wings. A better view for the passengers, really, than the crew.
Yeah, it's a good view, and for us, it's to check for ice. That's what it's for, as we said before. But also, they have quite a funny function in flight. I've seen someone do it once, and it worked. Where if you're flying past someone, you flash them, then they can see it and they flash it back.
Really?
That's really
fun. So it's
fun.
like a little pilot gag.
It's pretty good. I love it. I saw him do it. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And then I saw the flights. I was like, "No way!" He went, "Yeah, they saw it because they are pretty bright."
Yeah.
And I was like, "That's amazing."
That's quite cool. All right, and then obviously we talked about the nav and logo earlier on, and that's all pretty straightforward. All right, let's. Probably one thing that we want to do. We've got the windows open, a bit of a breeze, but it's pretty warm in here.
Yeah.
So it might be a good time now to start the APU and talk about what it can do for us.
I think that's a good idea. So the APU, and I know it's a little bit, I'm used to it, but it's not that conventional that it's got 2 buttons. And to start it, it's straightforward, but it's very easy to do it wrong. The first thing we do is you can select the master switch on.
Okay.
Now, selecting the master switch on, it's like imagine you're starting to boot up your PC. So you press the button, and then what will happen is there's a very small computer that's on the APU called the electronic control box. That powers on. It takes 3 seconds for that to power on, and then we're okay to start it after that. So you must wait the 3 seconds when you press the button on before you try and start it.
Okay. So you've got to wait 3 seconds.
Got to wait 3 seconds.
So turn it on. 1, 2, 3.
And now we can press the start button. Yeah.
So now, if we jumped around the back of the aeroplane, would we see that little flap opening?
Yeah, so as soon as you press the master switch on, then the flap starts to open.
And then will we see also down
Yeah, so
here,
there we go. We just saw it, yeah.
So now it says flap open. And so what's happening now? The N is there's the little fan again in the
I'm not
APU?
sure if it's probably the N1 or the N2, but they haven't given it a value, but it's just like the fan inside of it is now spinning up, so you can see the temperature's increasing. So obviously the fuel's gone in, the combustion has started, and you'll see that the EGT, so that's the temperature of the gases coming out of the exhaust, have gone up.
And we can hear it.
And you can actually hear it, yeah. And you can see the limit for starting is quite a lot higher than the normal operation because it can get a bit hot starting, basically.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why you see the sort of lines dance all over the place when it's starting, which is normal.
All right.
Because now we can see it coming down, the limit, yeah.
So the limit, so you expect that exhaust gas temperature will kind of peak up and then it will go down again.
Yeah.
And then we can now hear it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see that it was at about 700 before, and now you can see it's down to 420. And the limit has changed from about over 1,000 just to below 700.
And all these are the real numbers. Like everything happens at the when you would expect it to do. It's all been modeled correctly.
It has. They've done a really good job with it, and the audio as well is great.
Yeah. Okay. Now it's disappeared now because the APU started. So the aeroplanes decided we don't need to see this page anymore. Yeah. It's like you've had your fun.
There you go.
Here's the
back
doors
to the
again.
doors.
So if I put the APU page back on,
yeah,
just so we know what we're looking at, it says APU Gen 0%. So does that mean that it's not using any power? That's why it's naught.
Yeah, what it means is there's a generator, an electrical generator on there, and it's saying, well, I'm not doing anything at the moment because I'm not being used. So I'm ready with my 115 volts and my 400 hertz, which is the correct amount of voltage and hertz, but I'm not being used. So it's just telling you that percentage-wise, I'm not being used at all.
Okay, all right. So that's fine. So we can kind of leave that, and then to clear that, I just press the APU button and it goes back to the doors page.
Exactly.
All right, cool. So we've done that. And then if we want to get some cool air because we're really cooking in here, then for that we need to turn on the bleed, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, all right. So we turn the APU bleed on. So is that now taking that... There we are. We can,
you can hear it. Yeah, yeah.
So what's happening now? It's taking air from the APU and it's pushing that through the air conditioning.
So what it's done is the air conditioning with things that we looked underneath the belly, the packs, which were those things with the funny intakes, one on one side, one on the other.
Yeah.
It's now taking its hot air from the APU and it's channeling them to the packs so that we can get some air conditioning.
Okay, all right. So we're now going to start feeling some nice cool air.
Yeah, and you can hear they are so loud.
Yeah.
They are really loud.
So now would be a good opportunity probably to close the windows, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let's lift up the little pin. It's hot outside today. It's like nearly 30 degrees here in Menorca. So we close that. That makes it considerably quieter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then close that one. Whoops. I'll put the blind up as well, actually. Probably not.
It's nice. You've got the sun out there.
Not a bad day to close the blind.
Exactly.
Right, okay, cool. So, and in fact, you know what? We can close the... So what do you do with these? You just drag them down?
They're basically just like the sun visor in your car.
Oh, right.
And you can angle them at any angle.
Whoops. Hang on. Let me just put that one back. So you drag this, and then what do? You just drag it down like that.
Yeah, you just drag it into any position. In the real one, it clips into its little clip there.
Yeah.
Or you can have it at any angle, like up, down, left, right, just so you block the sun. They're really good, actually.
Wow, yeah, that is quite good. Yeah. But you can imagine you could bang your head onto it. Like if you've got it down here, if you turn around like this, you probably bang your head into it.
Yeah, that's why you normally stow it above you.
I'll probably stow it for the for this bit because that's probably a bad idea. But we'll keep the blinds there. And are there blinds at the back as well?
Blinds at the back as well, yeah.
All right, okay. Well, let's do this. We're gonna try and look at all these airplanes on approach. I think that's going to be a go around.
I think that's going to go very well.
I think that's going to be a go around, don't you?
We might be yeah, there we go. Yeah,
there we are. There's a go around. Wow, look at that. So what do we got? That's what Thomas Cook. That's an A321 by the looks of it with the Sharklet.
Could be, yeah.
And then that's a 2E on the go around.
Well, there we go. A little bit of fun. There we go.
Yeah, there we are. Look at that. He's giving a bit of brake smoke as well, that guy.
He's keen. Right. He wants to try and get off.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the overhead then, and let's just continue this. So we've got some nice cool air now coming into the flight deck.
Yeah.
And if we want, I guess, without getting too distracted, we can just check. If we wanted to have a look at what the temperatures were doing, it's the COND page.
Yeah, which stands for conditioning. Yeah.
Okay, so we click that. And then we can see it's 22 inside. So actually, the temperature's coming down quite nicely already.
Yeah.
And then 25 and 20. Would people be moaning at 25 degrees?
That's okay.
It's not.
Yeah, anything above 27, 28, you start to feel a bit like.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'd probably be okay there. We're not going to have people moaning yet.
No.
Okay, that's cool. Right. And then in terms of, again, I know I don't want to get too far away from what we're talking about, but while we're just setting the air conditioning, where would we want to set these normally in the Airbus?
Normally a little bit. So where we had them before, so a little bit to the left of the central position.
Just not quite 12 o'clock.
Yeah, because the 12 o'clock position is 24 degrees.
Okay.
So if you think about that, 24 degrees, then you go a little bit to the left, so about 22, something like that.
Right, okay. So we'll leave it about 11:30.
That looks about right, yeah.
So obviously, does it depend a bit on what's going on? So today, it's 27 degrees outside.
Yeah.
It's a hot day. We have 2 doors open, so presumably a lot of warm air coming in from outside.
Yeah.
So we'd want to keep this on the cooler side.
Yeah, that's right, and depends on the, sometimes with a 319 or 320, some of them are a bit older and all this sort of stuff. So some of them cool really well, some of them don't, and it all depends on the day. But the aircraft is very good at keeping the correct temperature. Once you've set it, it's actually very, very stable.
Which is unlike the Dash 8.
Yeah.
Remember back to our Q400 training, apparently that's just useless.
I've heard the 7.3 is actually quite tricky as well. A lot of the guys are constantly spinning at this thing. You just set it, forget it, and it does a pretty good job.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so this one works quite well. All right, so let's just go back then. Let's just finish off this little bit of this down here. Integrated light, I guess, is pretty straightforward. This is just the backlighting for the overhead, right?
That's all it is. Yeah,
that's it. Do you generally have this on in the day? I mean, in the sim, the flight deck always seems quite dark to me, but because I generally will kind of leave this on. In the real aeroplane, what do you do?
Normally we have it off.
You normally turn
have
it
off because it's quite clear to see what we're looking at. But if we couldn't see it, we would put it on.
Right.
Generally,
okay.
we have it off.
All right. Okay. Well, we're going to leave it off for the time being. Maybe we'll stick it back on later on. Right. We've got the seatbelt sign. I guess that's pretty easy. Is this just going to be on when we're moving? It's on. When we're not moving, it's off, right?
Yeah. Basically, you want it on when you finished refueling, and it also gives an excuse for the cabin crew. If someone says, "I want to," no, you have to sit down. The seatbelt sign's on.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. So you can use that to get people to do what you want.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess when we're in the air, turbulence and stuff like that. But we'll
exactly.
We'll come back to that later on. No smoking sign. I guess some of them don't have this anymore.
No, some of them call it I think they call it a PED switch, so the personal electronic devices, because that's realistically what it's sort of used for now. And leaving it in the auto position is what we do at Eurojet. Reason is when the gear goes down, it makes a bong. When the gear comes up, it makes a bong. And it's for the cabin crew to know when the gears come up and down.
Okay, so that's quite interesting. So is that if any of the cabin crew are not seated?
Yeah,
if they hear the gear.
They hear the gear. The gear's quite loud, but if they don't hear the gear, they'll hear the bong, and they'll see the no smoking signs come on, and it's like, okay.
Okay.
So it's awareness for the crew.
So in an Airbus, when you take off and you hear the bong, and when you land and you hear the bong, so we always hear the bong.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
It's from the gear.
It's from the no smoking sign being on auto.
That's what it is.
Wow, okay. That I didn't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's just talk about the emergency exit lights. What's this little button underneath? And then we have exit light on, off, and arm. At the moment, looks like it's in the arm position, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
What does this do?
So it should always be in the arm position, because then the emergency exit signs are armed. But if you decide to put it in the off position, that little signs comes off and says off on there.
Okay.
I find it a bit strange because there's not many other ones that if you put it off, it also tells you it's off. But it does it because it deems it to be quite important, which it is, because if they're not there, then in the evacuation it won't light up the lights on the ground.
Okay, so the emergency exit lights, are they the little lights above the windows and all that stuff to help you find the exits?
And they're all based on a different, their own internal battery system and this, that, the other. So if the electrical supply for the aircraft's completely lost, then they still function.
Okay,
but they need to be armed.
So if I do a terrible landing, we end up in a ditch.
Yeah.
The electrical power's cut because the engines are off. And obviously there's no APU or anything at that point. They sense the loss of electrical power, is that right?
And they will still come on. Yeah.
Right, okay. So is there an off switch? Is there an off switch to leave them? Do you actually turn this? Because in the Airbus, I've noticed when we load it from cold and dark in the Flight Sim Labs config, this is already in ARM.
Yeah,
is it something you turn off?
It's something we turn off, actually.
You turn it off?
Yeah, we turn it off, but then you make sure it's back to armed.
Right, okay. Yeah. So at the end of the night, we need to make sure this is in the off position.
Yeah.
Right, okay. All right, cool. And then if we had an emergency and we remembered, I'm guessing, is it part of a checklist you could turn it on?
I think it is. It could be, but for the actual emergency evacuation we use, we just assume that the system's done its thing. But if someone says from the back, hey, look, we're trying to evacuate, we can't see, okay, let's put it on, see what it does. Okay. Hopefully it'll help.
Right, okay. Yeah. And then above it, ice, IND, and standby compass.
Yeah.
What's that lighting up?
So what that lights up is, the Airbus is a sophisticated airplane, but sometimes it isn't sophisticated. So for some of the specifications that people have, to detect the ice, you just have a stick, like a little probe that sticks out the window.
Okay.
And when you turn that light on, it lights that probe up, and you can see if there is any ice on it. And if there is ice on it, then you need the wing anti-ice.
Okay, all right. But we're going to come back. We're going
to come back to that, yeah.
We're going to talk about icing at a later date. And there's also light up the standby compass, which is this little thing here.
So they just, for some reason, decided to put them both on one switch.
So, there you go. All right. So you get the stick lit up and you get the standby compass lit up.
2 for 1.
So I guess we might have to check for ice, but if we're using the standby compass, then we're probably having a really bad day,
having a very bad day, yeah.
Dome light, first of all. We all know what the dome light is. These 2 big, bright white lights behind us, yeah?
Yeah, and that's all it is. It just gives you a lot of light for... You can use them for takeoff, and if you want, you can use them for landing. Different people have different opinions on them. One of the opinions is if you do a rejected takeoff, you want the dome light to be on already, so you don't have to try and turn it on, because it could have plunged the aircraft into darkness. But it's just a personal preference.
On the ground, obviously, we don't need it now because it's the day and it's bright, it's sunshine. But if we were doing a nighttime turnaround, you'd have those on what?
Bright's pretty like...
It's too bright.
Yeah.
So you fall out of bed at 4 a.m., you're at 5, and it's like, okay, can we turn the lights down a bit until I've had some coffee?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We'll leave that off for now. And then the annunciator light test. Now, this is quite cool. All aircraft have this.
Yeah.
And this is always fun to play with. My understanding is it turns all the lights on.
Yeah, it turns all the lights on, and you've got the setting that basically puts them to bright, which they are now, or you can have it on dim.
That's
so you
quite
can
cool.
just look at it. It's cool.
Interesting, in this mode, you actually see some lights that you don't see. They're not modelled.
Yeah, they're
normally,
not modelled,
but the side stick priority that we're gonna come back to and talk about. You don't normally see this light.
No.
Yeah, which is quite cool. Right. Okay. Any rules about using this or how it works?
So. Realistically, you only have to use it for we'll come back to it when we come to do the door check. So that's what we use it for. But don't use it in flight. Now the reason for
don't use it in flight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the reason that comes from, as always with aviation, something happened.
Okay.
And I've forgotten which carrier it was now, but they turned it on in flight, and to test to see if they thought a light was broken.
Right. So some guy was like, hang on a minute, let me do this. So he turned it on.
So they turned it on, and now take a look at the FCU here.
All right. So it's all lit up. All the digits are lit up.
All the radios are lit up. Everything. And then he went, all right, well, obviously wasn't that. They turned the light off, and it didn't go off.
What? And the switch
I think the
came
switch
off in his
broke
hand
or something like that.
Oh my God.
And you can imagine now, you don't know what altitude you're at, you don't know what altitude you're going to, you can't put a heading in, you don't know if the autopilot's on, you don't know what mode you have selected. It's a big problem.
That is...
It's a big problem.
That's pretty disastrous, right?
Yeah, it is. So after that, Airbus were like, don't do that.
Right. So we do not touch this in flight.
In flight, no.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right. That's worth knowing. All right. Let's move up a little bit. We'll go back to the left. Wing and engine anti-ice. We're going to do an icing flight. We're going to talk about all that later on.
Yeah.
That's not anything we need to worry about.
No.
Nice hot day in Menorca anyway today. We're not going to need it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Right. Probe and window heat. Same thing.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it when it's cold enough to need it. Cabin pressure over here on the right side. I'm guessing that these are kind of bad day switches for problems.
All of these are, apart from the landing elevation selector, which is a bad day switch, but we must check that it's in automatic.
All right, so it needs to be here in the top.
So even if you nudge it a little bit like that, then it's using a manual system.
Right.
So it's quite easy to see. To look at it and go, that looks normal, but it's not. It has to be in the automatic, otherwise it's going to moan at you later on.
Okay.
So that's one thing we're checking.
And then the ditching switch.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're not going to be ditching.
No.
Well, you never know what might happen.
Yeah.
But what happens if you press the ditching switch?
So if you press the ditching switch, it closes everything up on the aircraft.
So all those outflow valves that we looked at, and the intakes and outflow valves and everything, they all get closed.
They all close immediately on the press of the button. And that's because of the reason, if you are ditching, then you want the aircraft to float, and that's the button that they didn't press when they got on the
Hudson. So the only time an Airbus has ever landed in the sea,
they didn't press
it.
And the thing was, it was at the end of a 4-page checklist, which has been revised.
So is it now at the top of the checklist?
It's one of the ones that says if you're landing on water, consider ditching, push button. So it says it's almost straight away.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, you can't really blame those guys.
No, you can't blame them at all, and that's why it sort of sank so quickly. Because otherwise it would have just sat on top of the water, more than likely, and not sunk.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Is there any other time we press that?
Yeah, when you're doing the de-ice stuff, we'll come back to this, because if you think about it logically, you don't want the fluid coming inside the air conditioning
So
system.
they spray the aircraft with the de-icing fluid. You don't want that coming back inside.
So you press it then.
Okay.
It's kind of weird to press it, because you think, I would have to press this again.
Yeah, it's like a button you don't want to press.
It's guarded as well, so it's a serious switch.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to all that sort of philosophy later on.
Okay, cool. All right, so there's not so much left now.
Not much.
We've made quite a big dent in it. Right, let's talk about the air conditioning. We've already talked about the selectors. We don't really need to talk about that anymore.
Yeah.
We've got the pack flow. Now, I'm thinking, all right, it's a really hot day. We're all sweaty. We're on the ground. If we turn this to high, we're going to get more air conditioning, are we? Or we're not?
So again, it's one of those Airbus things where they're like, they know best for whatever reason.
Okay.
So if you're on the ground, or if you're using the APU bleed, I should say correctly, to supply the air conditioning system, which we are, it is always on a high flow.
Okay.
Irrespective. So if we put it on low, normal, or high, it's not going to change.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So on the ground, the air conditioning is always in high.
If you're using the APU bleed.
If we're using the APU bleed, which we are.
We are.
So using the air conditioning on the ground, the aircraft's own air conditioning, it's always in high. Doesn't matter what this switch is doing.
No, it doesn't matter what it's doing.
Okay.
Yeah, and you would use that switch in a different position for when the engines are running. So what we would do on the setup flow is when we get to this point, if we know there's less than 130 people on board, then we put it to low.
And is that the same for the 319 and the 320?
It is actually, which is
weird because
weird.
It's a smaller airplane. You would think it would be a lower number of passengers.
I would have thought so as well, but I guess it's because the air conditioning systems may be the same.
Maybe.
Possibly, but then you would. I don't know. That's what they say.
Maybe it's a standard number just to keep it simple.
Know.
I don't know. I'm not sure. So okay, so if we have below, what is it,
130.
130, we put that to low.
Yeah.
And does that run the air conditioning at a lower setting and uses, I guess, less fuel?
Yeah, less fuel, less wear, and it can operate then because it knows that you haven't got as many people to cool, so it's okay. Because it sees it as, if you've got 130 people on a 180 odd seater aircraft, then realistically your air conditioning, a lot of the plane there's no one sitting at.
Yeah.
So if you put it on low, it's okay. Yeah.
So the high position, you might use that. Let's say we're flying in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, and it's 50 degrees Celsius outside.
Yeah.
And obviously the packs go off for the engine start. I mean, I've lived in the Middle East. And you can tell when the engines start because suddenly you feel really warm. Even though the packs are only off for, a couple of minutes.
Not even something like a minute maybe.
For the engine start, but you really notice it, and you see people and they start like reaching.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. Yeah.
So is that a situation where once the engines are back on, you'd flick that to high?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are getting that air conditioning back.
That's what you could use it for. Yeah. And you could leave it in high if it really was a hot day. You think, you know what? Going to give you all the cooling I can give, and then you leave it in high.
Okay, got you. All right. And then there's a couple more switches. Like there's a hot air switch. Obviously, there's the pack switches themselves. We're going to come back and talk about turning the packs on and off.
Yeah.
But right now, we don't need to worry about that.
Just leave them on.
We can just leave them on.
Yeah.
Why would you turn the hot air off, just out of interest?
Now, you could turn the hot air off because sometimes you can get a fault that basically requires it to do so, because the hot air is supplementing the cold air that comes out of it, but you can sometimes get a valve that's not quite opening or closing right, and you have to leave it turned off.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So it's a bit of a bad day switch, really.
Yeah. Realistically, in a normal operation, you shouldn't have to use it.
Okay. All right. And then going along the bottom, we've got the APU bleed. We already talked about that. This is using bleed air from the APU to drive into the packs.
Yeah.
And am I right in thinking we're also going to use that air to start the engines as well?
That's correct.
Right. Okay. But we're going to come to that when we get to it. Let's just talk about the cross bleed switch here, which is auto shut and open.
Yeah.
We don't need it right now.
No, we don't need it right now. When it's in the auto position, what it means is if you've selected the APU bleed on, it will open itself.
Okay.
So that's how the auto positions logic works. So that's how it works. And if you have it shut, it's shut. If you put it to open, it just opens.
Okay. Yeah. All right. When would we ever need this switch?
You'd need this actually when we have you have sometimes a single bleed is inoperative, so then you need to leave it open manually so that you can start the engines if you're doing an engine start on stand. And also if we have a fire in one of the engines, we have to shut this because we don't want any of the bad contaminants coming in the other, from one side of the system to the other.
Oh, right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's used quite a bit, actually. Yeah, not in normal operations, but
it's not unknown. You might have to fiddle around with
I've
this.
used it a fair few times.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
So again, we're going to try and introduce a couple of scenarios where we might need to do this. Maybe like a cross-bleed engine start or something like that.
Something like that. Then you will definitely need it.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to try and demonstrate where this is used. Turning the engine 1 and 2 bleeds off. There's not really any reason to do that, is there?
No, only if they're told to you by the engineers that they're broken. But again, the only time you would need to turn it off is in the case of, say, maybe a failure would require you to turn it off because of performance reasons.
Okay, all right. And again, with the engine bleeds, this is just the compressed air, effectively, from the engines, which is used for different things on the airplane.
That's all it is.
The air conditioning. And what else do we use bleed air for from the engines in the Airbus?
So you use it for air conditioning, as you said, starting the engines and anti-ice.
Okay, so sending that air to the... is it to the engines or the slats? But again,
engines
I'm
and slats.
probably getting ahead of ourselves.
No, that's it. You're right. That's all it is.
That's it. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. What that air is being used for? The ram air button. What would that do?
It's definitely a bad day switch. This one, and that's why it's guarded, because you can see you don't want to normally press it. But what it's for is if we lose all of our air conditioning system, or if we've got a lot of smoke in there, you can turn it on, and it basically opens a little scoop underneath the aircraft, and it rams air, as it suggests from its name, into the system and blows the smoke out. So you wouldn't use it in normal line operations. Okay, all right.
So it's very much a bad day switch.
Yeah, very much so.
Right, okay. Now, we're nearly there. Let's go and talk about the electric page. The nice thing with the Airbus is that none of the panels are that big.
No,
really.
They're great, and they're really well organised, I think.
Yeah, in like an hour, we've almost done most of the flight deck, which is quite nice. So, we've already talked about the batteries. That's pretty straightforward. We've got a few of the buttons that I think are worth talking about. External power, I think we all know what that is. Big power cable, plugs into the outside, like a big giant battery charger. And that's it. Is the aeroplane... We've now started the APU. What's powering the aeroplane? The external power or the APU?
This is what was interesting, because remember we looked at the APU before and it said 0% load.
Yeah, so if we look down, it's still on the doors page right now, but if I bring up the APU page, it says 0.
Yeah, so at the moment, the external power is supplying the entire electrical system for the aircraft. Yeah.
And is it in a kind of hierarchy? It goes. There's no engines.
No,
presumably.
exactly. Yeah, so the hierarchy would go engines at first. There aren't any, so it's not using it. Then, interestingly enough, it goes APU and then external. But if you select the external power on, like we have done first, yeah. So you can select it at any point. So even if you, for example, if you do an APU only start, so we start it first, that will obviously use that as a generator. But then if we selected the external power, it would override it because we've asked for it on. We push the button and say we want it.
Okay.
So it breaks the hierarchy.
So we've got the APU on, so I could turn the external power off now.
Yep, just turn it off.
Right, and we hear that big chunk.
Yep.
What's that big chunk noise?
So behind us in the flight deck, we have things called generator line contactors, and they're big switches basically, and they go click and they open. So it's disconnected the external power and it just connected the APU generator.
So the APU generator is now... Yeah. So where it before it said 0%, it's now saying 20.
Because now it's running the electrical system, yeah.
Okay.
And this is why it's using its hierarchy now. So it's saying, are there any engines? No. Is there an APU? Yes. So it's using the APU. Is there an external power? Yes, but it's not selected, so I'm not going to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in theory, if I now turn the external power back on... Yeah. Even though the APU is higher in the hierarchy than the external power, what will it do? It will now go back to external power because we've asked it to.
That's what it is, because it basically sees it as it says avail. So it's telling you, hey, it's available, but it's not going to use it. You've pressed it, so now it's going to go, oh, because you've pressed it, you obviously want it. So then it's going to override the hierarchy order. And now then disconnect the APU.
So, okay, right, I've got you. Okay, so the APU is now avail again, but it's back to 0% load.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah. So basically that's how it works. It works in a kind of hierarchical order.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is the primary time you use this is, when you want to disconnect the external power, you just press the button. It automatically connects the APU. You don't have to manually select those generators on.
Okay. So like in a 737, you've got to manually configure this yourself.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. Same with, when you do an engine start, it will automatically go click and the generator will come on, click, and then it will leave the APU sitting there, not running the electrical system, so you can just turn it off.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Is there any point in leaving, is there any benefit in leaving the external power and the APU running together? Does that help anything?
It does, because, we were saying that it's a little jet engine in the tail. Now, if you make it run the electrical system as well as the air conditioning system, it has to work a bit harder. So it can't dedicate as much of its performance to cooling.
Okay.
So if you leave the external power connected, as we've shown, it has a 0% load on its generator.
Yeah, of course. So, so it's all it's doing is air.
Yeah, so then it can do more of that.
Okay, all right. So again, really super hot day.
Yeah.
Leave the external power on and run the APU. You'll get cooler air.
That's
more air.
Yeah, exactly.
Got you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's talk. I'm guessing some of these are kind of bad day. The IDG switches, bad day switches.
They are, definitely.
We will come back to. The generator 1 and 2. Is the generator, does each engine have a generator?
That's right. Each engine has its own engine-driven generator for the electrical system, and that's what we can see there, Gen 1 and Gen 2.
Okay, all right. And at the moment it says fault because the engines are not producing
That's correct, yeah.
any electricity.
Yeah.
So as well as driving and thrusting the airplane through the sky, they also generate electricity to run the lights and everything else.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and at the moment they're not doing that.
They're not doing that, so they're saying fault because I'm not doing that.
Right, okay. And then the APU gen, at the moment the APU generator, the light is out because the APU generator is switched on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a bit one of the APU gen button here looks quite normal, but it is a bad day switch. Because realistically, because we just proved how you can connect, reconnect, all this sort of stuff without having to press it, there's no reason why you'd ever press that.
So we don't really need the APU gen switch.
No.
So at the moment the external power's on.
Yeah.
So turning the APU gen off isn't going to do anything right now.
No.
Except it's going to put all the load. No, actually, because we're not using the electricity from the APU.
Yeah. So if you did this, if you press that, technically nothing should happen.
So we've turned it off.
Nothing's happened.
And nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Because.
See, it says APU gen off.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So nothing's changed?
No.
Right, okay. Is the APU still giving us bleed air at this point?
It is. Yeah, It's just turned the generator aspect of that off.
So you got to think about the APU in there's like two systems effectively. There's like the air side and the electric side.
And that's all it does.
And all we've done is we've just turned off the electric side.
That's it, yeah.
So to turn off the air side, we would have to turn off the APU bleed.
That's correct.
Right? So now if we turn the bleed off,
it's just sitting there.
The sound goes. So the APU is still running, but it's not doing anything now.
It's just running to run itself.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's turn the bleed on. So the APU bleed is the air.
Yep.
And the APU gen is the electricity.
Exactly.
Got you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Okay. So let's just finish off this page then. We've got commercial and galley over on the left-hand side there. What's this doing?
Yeah, so they're customer options as well. Not all the aircraft will have these, but what they're for is commercial is like the in-flight entertainment stuff. So if you need to turn that off, and you might need to turn that off. When we were saying about that emergency electrical configuration where we sort of got a bad fire or whatever, you might want to try and work out, hey, is it the in-flight entertainment?
Because this has brought down the Swissair MD-11 was brought down because the IFE caught fire.
Yeah, so this is why this button would turn that all off and isolate it and stop the fire from spreading any more than it already has done. Okay. Galley and cabin, it's just basically the electrics to the galley.
Right.
So the cookers and the ovens and all
that. So we want to make sure, so if that's switched off, we're not going to, with no coffee.
No, that's very important.
Well, I remember Myron saying in the 777, because that obviously has, external power 1 and external power 2.
Oh, that's interesting.
And sometimes it will shed, one of them. If there's a more important system, it will shed. And the first thing it sheds is the galleys, because it goes, you don't need coffee. So, but that doesn't happen in the Airbus.
It can do. If it gets into an emergency electrical sort of issue where it's worrying about issues, it will shed itself.
Okay.
And that's why if you look, the commercial has off written on it, and then the galley and cabin has auto and off. So it will automatically shed it if it needs to, or we can turn it off.
So interestingly, it could shed itself.
Yeah.
So it's saying, okay, I need electricity. So you know what? I'm going to shut off the galley because I can use this for something else. But that's a bad day.
That's a bad day. But also, interestingly, it can't do that for commercial.
Yeah.
So it will
always
so
leave those on.
There'll be no ovens, but there'll be guys sitting there watching stuff on there.
Despicable
We are on fire.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Okay, great.
I would think that comes from the fact that the commercial stuff is an add-on. Think about this came from the 80s.
Yeah, of course.
That in-flight entertainment wasn't a thing, but the galley was most definitely still a thing.
Of course, the galley was there,
yeah.
but the in-flight entertainment probably wasn't back then.
So that's why it's probably like that.
All right. Couple of other little switches that we've not covered yet. The bus tie in the middle.
Yeah.
When would we need to... let's just have a real quick explanation of what a bus is. Is the bus like an electrical system, or are there different buses? The bus is what carries it.
Yeah.
All the systems get their electricity from that bus.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And we have multiple buses on there. So that's why we've got the DC bus 1 and 2, and you can see AC bus 1 and 2 drawn on the overhead, just so it makes it easy to see where the power is going.
Okay. And then what does the bus tie do?
So if you think of the bus tie, the systems are connected together on the left and the right, but there might be a scenario where one side is damaged or it's making the other side not work properly. So if you click that, it separates the systems.
Okay.
So that's why it's called a bus tie. So it ties them together automatically, so that's why it's in auto, so it can break the tie as well, but sometimes you might need to do that manually.
Okay, all right, but is that generally a bad day switch?
It's definitely a bad day switch.
Right, okay. Yeah. And then over on the right hand side we've got that ACESS feed. That again looks like a bad day switch.
It is, and it's a bit of an interesting one actually, because you can see there's the AC Essential bus. Now the AC Essential bus is
that what it means? ESS Essential?
Yeah, Essential, yeah. And obviously, clues in the name, it's essential stuff. So it's when you're having a real bad day, you really need that bus. Now, we can see from just the diagram on the overhead, it's normally powered by AC Bus 1.
Yeah.
So you can see the green arrow goes in there, but it can be supplied by AC Bus 2.
Okay.
So if AC Bus 1 fails, it should, and this is a customer option, depends on the type and spec that you have, automatically go with AC Bus 2. But if it doesn't, you have to press that button. And when you press it, it doesn't say on, it says alternate. So it's saying, I'm now using the alternate AC bus to power my AC Essential bus.
Gotcha. All right. Okay. So that's pretty much the electrical system, or for now, that's
it's
kind of...
It's not too complicated, the electrical system. It's actually all right.
Yeah. That's kind of all we need to know. Right. Yeah. Now, there's a bit more to understand. The fuel pumps, I guess, are relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
How many tanks do we have on an A320?
So we've got an outer tank, an inner tank, and a central tank. So we've got one outer on each side, and then two inners, so one on each side again, and one center tank.
Okay, all right. And we have pumps. What does it do? Do they pump the fuel out of the tank into the engine, or down the pipe connected to the engine?
That's what they do. They kind of pump it down the pipe into the engine. You know, the pump itself is in the tank. It's submerged in the fuel, and it sucks it in and then sends it to the engine. That's
okay. And can we? Obviously, we're going to turn these on. If we turn them off during the flight, does the fuel stop and the engine stop?
So with the tanks that are on the sides, so the inner tanks and the outer tanks, they will still supply fuel because they're above the engine. So they sort of by natural gravity.
So just gravity will fall down into the engine.
Exactly. But the center tank, because it's below the engine, you can't use the fuel in that anymore. Okay.
All right. So it would be, I mean, not that we're going to do it, but it would be a bad idea to start turning these off. Could we start the engines without them?
I don't know actually. You might be able to. You might be able to, but it might need a sort of spike of pressure that we might not be able to give it from just gravity feeding.
Okay.
But it's possible.
So it's possible, but it's really not recommended.
No, I think
presumably as soon as you rotate and the fuel potentially sloshes back a bit.
You might get a phone call from Eurojet saying, what were you doing?
What were you doing?
Why?
All right, so we know the what. Let's talk about the how.
So normally for the procedure is we turn the pumps on, apart from the center tank pumps if we're refueling.
Okay.
So that's it. And we just leave them like that.
So do we have to remember then to turn the middle ones on and off during a refueling? Is there an easy way of doing it?
Yeah, really the easy way to do it is to just, engine shutdown, always turn the center ones off. Because if you do refuel, then you needed to have done it. If you don't refuel, it doesn't really affect it anyway.
Because I guess it's quite hard to know exactly when they're refueling, because the airplane will tell you when it's refueling.
Yeah.
But it's quite hard to know when he's fueling, when he's not, when he's finished.
Yeah, that's why it's the easiest just to do it that way.
All right.
Just keep it safe, keep it simple.
So the left side go during the setup, first flight of the day, we turn them on.
Yep.
And then they stay on the whole day.
Yep.
Until we're finished.
Exactly.
And then the right side is the same. The center pump on and off with the engine.
That's correct.
And that's it.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
There's a cross feed in the middle. Is that a bad day switch?
Yes. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it normally comes from a situation that's made it happen, but you can get imbalances of fuel for other reasons.
So the APU, for example, can imbalance the fuel, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
So the APU, where does the APU get its fuel from?
So the APU gets it from the left side, and we can actually see it on this diagram here. You can see the little arrow is on the left side of the system.
Yeah,
so it gets it from there, and it has its own pump, so we don't need to turn any of these pumps on for it to work.
Right, so at the moment, it's getting it all from the left side, so none of the fuel for the APU is coming from the right. So if we sat on the ground for 3 hours... then we would have a huge imbalance.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's when we would need to use it. So not necessarily a bad day, but
something unusual.
Yeah, something.
So we're going to try and get a situation. We're going to try and show you when you would need to use that.
Yeah.
And then the mode selector in the middle.
So what that is the Airbus has sort of fuel pump logic for the center tank pumps. So it's when the slats are out, they use the fuel from the center tank, and then it doesn't use it for takeoff. And there's various logic things.
There's lots of weird things.
Logic, and that's why that mode selector, if you see it says auto next to it, so when it's in its position, it is now automatically takes care of that. And if you, for whatever reason, want to turn that off, you select it off, and it then doesn't do it. It does it manually.
Gotcha. All right. Now, going above that, this is the hydraulic system. Now, I guess out of all the systems, probably apart from stuff like the flight control systems that are really quite complicated, the hydraulic system is quite a big deal in the Airbus, right?
Yeah, it is.
So, hydraulic systems, we've got 3 of them. It's too big for us to manually move the controls, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like, this is why these large aircraft, and it was around the 50s and 60s that sort of hydraulic boosted controls came in, where they had hydraulics before, but they needed so much effort to move them. This is why we have powered flight controls now, where we move something, a yoke or a side stick or whatever, and then we use the hydraulic system with pumps and actuators to move the flight controls for us, so we can have a reasonable amount of force and still fly big aeroplanes.
So something like, so for example, take the landing gear.
Yeah.
When we put the gear up, the gear obviously has to fight gravity and withdraw up into the wheel. Well, I can't imagine how heavy the landing gear is. I bet it's very heavy.
I think it's 3 tons each.
3 tons each?
Yeah, something like that.
So the whole aeroplane, total weight is what? Like max takeoff weight?
It's like 77 tons.
77 tons, and 6 and a bit less, I guess, for the landing gear.
Yeah. So
say 3, 6, I don't know, let's say 1.5 tons. So nearly 10 tons is just the landing gear.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot, and the gear, you can see it when we were doing the walk around. It's a huge piece of metal.
Yeah. And this is an A320, so think about a 747 or A380 landing gear.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a lot.
Like, that weighs as much as an A320.
Yeah, more than likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're a huge piece of equipment.
So there's no way, like, you could have an electric motor or something to bring it up, but you need a lot of power to get that up.
You need a lot of energy to move it, and the only way to sort of transfer that sort of power now is hydraulics.
Okay.
If we use an electric motor, I'm sure we could do it with electrics.
But it would need to be a huge motor, very heavy.
Yeah, and not practical.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we use hydraulics. That's what we use it for, amongst other things. And do these all power different systems?
Yeah, so each one, they've got it set up so you can see it now on the diagram. So the green system has 1 engine pump, the blue system has 1 electrical pump, the yellow system has 1 engine pump and 1 electrical pump.
Okay.
And that's what we can see with these diagrams.
So we can see from left to right then, the engine 1 pump drives the green system.
That's correct.
And the green system will drive various things.
It's the primary system.
The primary system.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And then the blue system has that electric pump that you talked about. The yellow system has its own engine 2 pump and an electric pump. Now, if everything's working, does the aeroplane look after itself with this? It will just provide the hydraulic pressure to wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, there's no need to turn the pumps on manually before pushback or anything like that. It will do its thing.
Okay.
It will sort it out, and it will do everything it needs to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to come back and investigate the hydraulics in a bit more detail. But for this point in the training, is there anything on here that we need to press and anything that we need to know about?
Realistically, we can just leave the panel as it is now, just to be aware there's 3 systems, and it's good to know that the green system is the primary system, so it does the landing gear, a lot of the flight controls. The blue system also does quite a lot of the flight controls, and the yellow system is the one that's responsible for like the parking brake and alternate braking system. However, with the yellow system, there are, as you can see, there's an engine-driven pump and an electrical-driven pump.
Okay.
Now, it might not really seem like, well, why does it need an electrical pump? There is a reason why it needs an electrical pump. When we come to look in the flight preparation, we look at our little brake indicator, and it has they call it the triple indicator. That's what it's actually called.
All right, so let me just slide down here, and we'll have a look at this. Now, this is this little indication here to the right of the landing gear, yeah?
Yeah, that's it. And they call this the triple indicator because it has 3 needles. And what we can see here is when the parking brake is set, the parking brake, as we said earlier, is run off the yellow system. So this is displaying pressure from the yellow system. It's showing that the parking brake is on. It's got 1,000 and a bit PSI on the right and the left brake. And the accumulator pressure, that's what accu pressure is at the top, is a bit low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's the accumulator? Is the accumulator, by its name, something that keeps and holds hydraulic pressure from? Is it the engines when they're running?
It's basically, the accumulator is a big sphere somewhere in the bay of the aircraft, and it stores pressure in it. And it will get that pressure.
It's almost like a big balloon.
It's like a big balloon, yeah. It's like a big pressure balloon that's for the yellow system, and it's there, ready to be used when it needs to be. Because at the moment, we have no hydraulic systems. Okay. You know, they're all
So the APU's
off.
running, but the APU doesn't do anything for the hydraulics.
Nope, it just does air conditioning. So it does bleed air, electrics, and that's it.
And that's it, right? Yeah. Okay. So what makes the big balloon, the accumulator?
Yeah.
That presumably, when the engines are running, it gets restored. It pumps it back up.
Yeah.
But then when we park the aeroplane, does that like a balloon? Does it deflate over time?
Yeah, it will lose that pressure over time just because it's sitting there. It's not inherently a perfect seal, so a bit of it's going to leak out, and we're going to use the parking brake now and again, and that's going to use the pressure that's inside the system.
So if we turn the parking brake on and off, we'll see that drop.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So listen, just to kind of prove this, I mean, I'm guessing you wouldn't really do this on a real aeroplane. So I'm going to turn the brake. It doesn't matter. The chocks are in, right? So
you could do it. You could do it. You know. Yeah.
So I'm going to apply the brakes once. There's one brake application. So you see, it comes back up, and then you can see it. It's slow, but it is perceptible. As I turn the parking brake on and off, you can actually see it. It is dropping, isn't it, bit by bit?
It is, and you can see it. And the accumulator, when it's fully charged, is good for, they say, 11 brake applications.
Okay, so that's
roughly.
That's brake applications, as in you braking the airplane to a halt. That's not turning the parking brake on.
No, I imagine when they say 11, they're being pretty conservative anyway. That's sort of like the best day, and it's for landing. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So you can see we've dropped quite a bit already.
Yeah. You can see it's coming down. So once you've turned the parking brake, I mean, I know you're not going to sit at the gate and turn the parking brake on and off like 15 times. You'd be a bit of an idiot to do that.
But for maintenance, they could have been moving it around all night, and you can actually see, look how slowly the pressure. See, before we were at 1,000 and a bit PSI on each wheel, and now look, it can't maintain 800.
Yeah, that's right. Right, so just applied the brakes, and now we've got a bing, and it says brakes, brake Y, accu low pressure.
Yeah.
So does that basically mean that the sphere has now lost so much of its pressure, it's now struggling to actually keep the parking brake on?
Yeah, you can see that the brakes are only able to do about 500 PSI now, when before they were over 1,000, so they've almost lost half of their braking pressure.
Okay.
And the more that we do it, the worse it's going to get. So I imagine this warning is set up for a point where it's now getting pretty dubious if it's going to be able to hold it on the brakes.
So if they take the chocks out, there is a danger it might roll away.
Yeah, there is.
If it's a steep slope.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Now, how do we fix this?
Well, there's 2 ways to fix it, and I'll add as well a little bit of a note that you can see the little green that's on the accumulator pressure. Anytime it's outside of that, we can do this procedure that we're about to say. We don't have to wait for the ECAM.
We don't have to wait for the ECAM.
No, but this is the ultimate result of it getting really low is this.
Yeah.
But we can do it at any point. If you get in the flight deck a bit low, then we can apply what we're just about to say now. So yeah, we can use the yellow electrical pump. Now the yellow electrical pump will automatically put pressure into the yellow system, which is then going to charge up the accumulator. Job done. But to do this, there is a little bit of back and forth you need to do. Because you're going to pressurize a hydraulic system, you need to ask the ground crew, make sure they're clear.
We're pressurizing systems on the aeroplane, and it is potentially dangerous.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to ask and check, and it can create a delay, at the start of the day, which realistically maybe is not what you want. So there is another way, a trick.
There is another way.
There is another way,
and
it's a good way.
Trick?
It's a good one,
all right.
And it's what I use.
Okay.
So,
all right. So do tell.
So what it is we were saying earlier on that the cargo doors open and close.
Yeah.
With a hydraulic power. Now they are used off the yellow system, so they all come off the yellow system. So when you might have heard it as a passenger, you're walking up and you can hear the doors opening and closing. They select the door, select to open, and it automatically turns on the yellow electrical pump.
Really?
Yeah. So it uses the same pump.
The cargo door
Yep.
knows that this is low, and it will recharge. Hang on. Does it use it anyway?
It uses it anyway. It's just an after sort of effect of it doing it.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So basically, any time the cargo door gets opened,
yeah,
it will recharge the acupressure, this little sphere.
Exactly. Because just by design, they're using the pump, which to open the door, which is fair enough.
Which depletes the acupressure.
Yeah, which basically, because they're using the electrical pump to open the door, it then goes, well, the pump needs to come on because I need to open this door, and it will, by design, because it's pressurized the hydraulic system, just as an after thing, pressurize the accumulator.
Okay,
yeah.
So basically, if they kept opening and closing the doors, that would then deplete our ability to keep the brakes on.
Yeah,
which is not good.
No, so that's why it always just turns on the yellow electrical pump. It doesn't wait till it's low, even if it's fully charged. The accumulator can't have any more charge in it. It will still run the pump. Always run the pump. Yeah.
All right. So if I open up the, are we calling this the FMS MCDU?
MCDU. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do I actually turn it on? Is it hold down the brightness button, right?
That's it.
And you get this little ready thing.
Yeah, it's like the
yellow
thing running through its own little test.
Is that a little self-test? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, that's what it's doing.
All right. Okay. Now, I go to options. This is not something you have in the real aeroplane, obviously. No, not options. If I go to doors, and then is it just the forward and aft? It's not the bulk.
The bulk doesn't have an electrical operation.
Is it just you open it manually?
Yeah.
And that's
so then that's why that wouldn't pressurize the hydraulic system.
But the forward and the aft.
Yeah.
They do.
Any of those because they use a hydraulic.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to open the forward. I'm going to move that out of the way.
Yeah.
And you're saying that this is going to now repressurize
it should.
The brake pressure.
Yeah, it should. It will.
If they've modelled it.
If they model it, it will work.
It. Right.
I have faith.
FS Labs, we're counting on you. Let's do this. Wow, look at that.
And you can hear the pump.
Yeah.
That noise is the yellow electrical pump. Yeah. And if we basically put the pump on, it makes that same noise. That's not the doors, that's the pump.
So, yeah, I always thought whenever I flew this aeroplane before you came along, I thought that was the sound of the doors opening.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's the pump.
It's the pump. The doors are... The pumps are being powered by the door... the doors are being powered by the pump.
Right.
But the pump sounds the same if you use it or not.
If I open the aft one, you can see it comes up, the ECAM says cargo, even though it's full...
It
still runs the pump.
Still runs it because it doesn't want to use the accumulator pressure. The accumulator pressure is for the brakes only.
Right,
really.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's good. That's an impressive bit of modelling, huh?
Yeah. It's very, very impressive that they modelled that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is, just because I don't want to kind of jump the gun, I'm going to turn that off again. And we're kind of back where we started now, except we've got the cargo doors open, which is all right. It's not really a problem.
Yeah,
we can close them again later on.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then, real quick, let's just go back to the overhead, because we haven't quite finished.
We're nearly there.
We're nearly there, but we're not quite finished yet. So again, we've got fire. We're going to have a look at this. We may well have an expensive day for Eurojet at some point during our training, and we might get a chance to actually press some of these.
Yeah.
But for what we're doing right now, what do we need to press just to test it?
So for the tests for these, we have the test push button on the engine and the APU. So when we press it, it just runs its own self-test.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So do you do it in a particular order, or does it matter? Which order do you generally test it in?
Normally, I would do engine 1, engine 2, and the APU is done a bit earlier, but for us now...
So we should have actually, before we started the APU...
Yeah, we should have done the test.
Technically, we should have done the test before we did it.
But because we're working through it in a sort of... Yeah, but technically, the reason why you do the test before you start the APU is just to see if the system's functional. Really.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Now, if we do the test, is it going to shut the APU down or anything?
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't. All right. So we press that button, and it says squib and discharge. So is that just a a test for the lights.
It's just a test for the lights, yeah.
All right, and then if we look down, we've got master warn on that side and that side. It says APU fire, and then this is giving us the instructions about what to do, right?
Exactly, because it's basically tricking the system into thinking it really is on fire.
Right.
So it does everything exactly the same as it would do as if it was on fire.
Okay, all right. And if you're being a good boy, you've got to do that before you start the APU.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. And then engine number 1, same thing.
Yep.
And then master warn and master warn. Do we need to do anything down here with the ECAM?
No, all we look for is if it says engine 1 fire, and that's it.
I can see that there's a little arrow in the middle. Does that mean that this continues down?
That's what it means.
But do we need to go through that and clear it or anything, or can we just leave it?
We can just leave it. There's one more thing we just need to look at is by the thrust levers. That's it. There's the fire light for the engine. So you're next to the number 1. See, we have the fire. It says fire next to it.
Okay. All right. And then the same thing for number 2?
Exactly.
All right. So let's hold it down. And then, so we're looking for master warn, engine 2 fire.
Yep.
And then fire down there.
That's it, yeah.
In the real aeroplane, do you silence this while you're running the test?
Normally not. I normally just let it go.
Let it run. It's only for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So that's the engine fire, and all the bad day stuff is something that we can look at later on. Yeah. We've got some radios. This is the same radio as we've got down.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to this. One thing that I think is worth saying is that this one says ACARS. What's the story there?
Yeah, so for VHF3, what they have running on ACARS is the data for the airline, so we get our messages from our operations center, our digital clearances, all this stuff. It comes through the same radio that you communicate on, but it's just an ACARS frequency, and it just says ACARS because we don't know what the frequency is.
Okay,
yeah.
So it will be a frequency. It'll be like 1, 2, something.
It'll probably be something outside of the normal range, something that's sort of really weird.
Some really super
Some
high.
really weird.
Only an alien dog can hear it.
Yeah, I don't know what it'll be. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we're going to come back. We're going to talk a bit more detail about the radios. Yeah. Flight controls, we are going to come back and talk in more detail about all this stuff. We don't need to be pressing these right now.
No,
really.
they're the same as the other side. It's just the duplicate, so it's the ELAC 2, SEC 2, the SEC 3, and the FAC 2, rather than the number 1s, which are on the other side.
Okay, all right. Cargo heat, do they all have this?
No, it's a customer option. Yeah, and it's obviously, if you're putting stuff in the cargo hold that might want to have heat, then you would want this option. Whereas, if you're with Eurojet and we're just throwing bags in there,
then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your hair dryer gets cold and your your shorts and your Bermuda shorts. We don't really care.
No, exactly.
Right. Okay. So I guess a couple of switches to isolate things and stuff like that. But
yeah,
again,
it's all bad stuff.
They're all bad day stuff. But the only thing that matters is obviously the temperature control between cold and hot.
Yeah.
So if we've got a load of flowers in the back there, we don't want them to get too hot.
No, exactly.
If we've got dogs or cats or something, we don't want them to get too cold.
No, exactly.
And that's it. All right, cargo smoke, that looks like a bad day switch to me.
Yeah, the whole panel here is bad day stuff because it's to do with, obviously, if we have a fire in the cargo hold, it's going to tell us if it's aft or forward, and then we can discharge the agent there, and there's a test. But we don't do that test regularly. It's done by engineers.
It's an engineered thing. Yeah. All right, okay. So bad day switches we might get to at some point.
Yeah.
Ventilation. We looked at the blower switch earlier on,
exactly.
and that shut down the little inlet
and
made things a lot quieter. What's the other two?
So the extract does the same thing, but for the extract side, so you can override it rather than put it on manual, so it'll shut itself down as well. Very similar. And then the cabin fans are to do with the recirculation system, the air that's been recirculated comes through that. They're all bad day stuff, really.
Okay.
Yeah, so obviously you could do that to make it quieter, but you shouldn't have to use any of these.
So we shouldn't use any of these.
No.
And then the engine manual start, is this in case the kind of automatic system has had a problem and we've got to start them manually?
I've had to use it a few times on the line.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's sometimes you have, it says, due to whatever reason, you must do a manual engine start because it's broken, basically. And it's not that hard, but this is what they're used for. It's sort of like, think of it on the 737 where you're putting the fuel on.
Yeah.
This is what the manual engine start gets the engine turning, and then the master switch is going to engage the fuel.
Okay.
So that's why you need separate buttons for it. And also these buttons will be used a lot more by people who fly the IAE variants because there's a limitation. So if you have more than a 10 knot tailwind for an IAE engine, even on the stand, so obviously you might not be into wind at all, so it's very possible you're going to have a 10 knot tailwind, you have to do a manual engine start.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so the IAE engine, obviously there are different engine options in the A320. Eurojet's all CFMs.
Yeah.
And some airlines, British Airways famously, they're at IAE, different engine manufacturer.
different engine manufacturer, but only a small few differences. But that's one of the worst drawbacks, I think.
Yeah. While we're here actually talking about engines, let's have a quick conversation now. The fleet that you fly in the real world is CFM.
That's correct.
What are the kind of main differences, apart from the fact that you can't start the engines with a tailwind with the IEs? Are they a bit more fuel efficient? Are they a bit quieter? I mean, generally, just give me the kind of key differences.
Yeah, I think that the primary one with the CFM is maintenance-wise, they're a bit cheaper. They're also a little bit more basic, so that comes with the maintenance. Fuel efficient, I think they're a little bit more fuel efficient, but the IEs are more powerful, and they're a little bit smoother, apparently, because they have triple spool. So basically, there's more components in the engine that make it sort of accelerate smoother.
More fans and
more
things like that.
fans and things like that. So more complexity for smoothness, but higher maintenance costs. And yeah, primarily they have more power, and that also comes back to when they're taxiing. So when you're taxiing, you'll see a lot of the BA aircraft have to leave their gear down, have to take off because the brakes got so hot.
Yeah. So when you taxi, the whole thing shoots away from you.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas in the CFMs, you need to give it some engine power.
Exactly.
To get away.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and then we've got another wiper switch, another rain repellent switch, and that we've already covered.